The shrill, insistent alarm of the monitor cut through the sterile hush of Operating Room 1, a counterpoint to the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. Beneath my gloved hands, the president of Brazil's heart lay exposed, a vulnerable, pulsing muscle I was tasked to mend. 20 floors below, I knew, the grand hall of Lincoln Center would be vibrating with a different rhythm, the crescendo of Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, the very piece my sister Carmen had played with such focused intensity the night I had died in my first life. My parents, I was certain, occupied their customary front row seats, their faces rapt, their phones buzzing unheeded in their pockets, with the emergency notifications from the hospital, notifications they would, true to form, ignore. But this time, the scenario held a crucial difference. This time, I, Dr. Elena Vasquez, leading cardiac surgeon at Mount Sinai, held a scalpel, not just fading hope. "Scalpel!" I commanded, my voice muffled by the surgical mask but firm. The circulating nurse slapped it into my palm with practiced efficiency. My team, a well-oiled machine of residents, anesthesiologists, and scrub nurses, moved with precision around me, yet I could feel their sidelong glances. They knew. The hospital grapevine was ruthlessly efficient. They knew my younger sister was making her Lincoln Center debut tonight, a milestone performance. They likely wondered if Dr. Vasquez, the iron-willed surgeon, was distracted. Her mind split between the failing heart of a world leader and familial obligations. Let them wonder. My incision into the president's chest was clean, exact, a testament to years of relentless training and a fury so profound it had sharpened my senses to a preternatural acuity. He needed emergency coronary artery bypass grafting, a complex procedure under the best of circumstances. These were far from the best. The irony of it all, saving a powerful man's life while my own family, yet again, prioritized applause over a heartbeat, my heartbeat, left a metallic taste in my mouth, akin to blood, between meticulously placed sutures, grafting a new vessel to bypass the blockage. Fragments of memory surfaced, unbidden but familiar. The same family, the same unwavering hierarchy of priorities. In this new life, I had clawed my way back from the brink. The congenital heart condition that had plagued my first childhood had, through sheer, bloody-minded determination and a string of hard-won medical school scholarships been managed, survived. They, the Martinez family, had no inkling that the daughter they had mourned so performatively, the daughter whose medical needs had always been an inconvenient expense, was alive. I had ensured that. A legal name change, subtle alterations to my appearance, a complete severance from the past. Elena Vasquez was a ghost to them, a phantom conjured from their neglect. Carmen remained the golden child, her prodigious talent on the piano the glittering centerpiece of their existence. Our mother, Isabella Martinez, still managed her career with a zealot's devotion, every nuance of Carmen's public image meticulously curated. Our father, Ricardo Martinez, the man who had perpetually claimed poverty whenever my medical bills arose, still somehow found the funds for every new Steinway, every master class, every designer gown for Carmen's recitals. The echoes of their excuses, their justifications, their carefully constructed narratives of sacrifice, all for Carmen, never for me, were a dull ache that even the adrenaline of the operating theater couldn't entirely numb. Hours later, the president of Brazil was stable, his heart beating a strong, steady rhythm under my repair. In the quiet solitude of my office, the cityscape twinkling beyond the panoramic window, I pulled up the live stream of Carmen's performance. She was magnificent, I had to admit. Her fingers flying across the keys, the audience captivated. Then she hit it. The same discordant note in the arpeggio of the Chopin. A tiny imperfection that had always made me wince internally. A flaw only someone intimately familiar with her playing, with the piece, would discern. The audience, naturally, remained oblivious, lost in the drama of the music. As the final notes faded and applause thundered, my phone buzzed. An elegantly designed Evite to Carmen's exclusive afterparty. It had been sent, I noted with a flicker of grim amusement, to the old email address of Elena Martinez, a digital relic they clearly hadn't purged. They would assume Elena Vasquez, the celebrated surgeon, was merely another name on a vast society mailing list, someone entirely unconnected to their past. A slow smile spread across my face. I would attend. My entrance, I decided, would be memorable. The air in the reception hall, a chic Upper West Side venue, hummed with self-congratulation and expensive champagne. I arrived not as a forgotten sister, but as Dr. Elena Vasquez, the woman who had, mere hours ago, snatched a head of state from the jaws of death. The buzz of my recent high-profile success preceded me. Carmen's agent, a sleek man named Julian Thorne, with eyes that perpetually scanned for opportunity, made a beeline for me before I'd even accepted a glass of water. Dr. Vasquez, an honor, he gushed, his handshake firm. We heard about the president. Astonishing work. Thank you, I replied, my voice coolly professional. And congratulations on Carmen's performance. Truly breathtaking. I allowed my gaze to drift towards my sister, holding court amidst a circle of admirers. Her technique is impeccable, though, I added, as if an afterthought, I did notice a very slight tremor in her right hand during the faster passages. Almost imperceptible, of course, but something a musician of her caliber might want to have evaluated. Early signs of repetitive strain can be subtle. Thorne's smile didn't falter, but his eyes sharpened. Oh, do you think so? It's a common occupational hazard, I said, retrieving a card from my clutch. If she ever needs a specialist consultation, I'd be happy to recommend someone. Or even see her myself, schedule permitting. I handed him my card, the embossed lettering gleaming under the chandeliers. Elite performers deserve elite care. He pocketed it with a murmured thanks, promising to call. The first thread of my web was spun, the bait meticulously placed. As I shook Thorne's hand, a polite dismissal, Carmen herself turned, her gaze sweeping across the room. Her eyes, the same dark, intense eyes I remembered from countless childhood squabbles and shared secrets, met mine. For a fraction of a second, they scanned past me, dismissive. Then they snapped back, widening almost imperceptibly. Her smile faltered. She looked directly at me, truly looked, for the first time in 8 years. Her eyes narrowed with almost recognition. Does she remember her dead sister's face? The faint flicker of recognition in Carmen's eyes was a spark I had anticipated, a subtle shift in her carefully composed public facade. It was a look I filed away as Thorne, true to his word, called within days. Carmen's slight tremor, he admitted, had indeed become more pronounced, causing her considerable anxiety. An appointment was scheduled. Under the bright, sterile lights of my examination room, Carmen Martinez was a study in controlled panic. The golden child, her career, her entire identity, now faced the prospect of it all being snatched away by failing hands. As Dr. Elena Vasquez, I was empathetic, professional, meticulously examining the inflamed tendons. Severe tendinitis, bilateral, I diagnosed, the medical jargon a shield. Potentially career-ending if not managed aggressively. During the consultation, while discussing her medical history, she sighed dramatically. It's just my luck. My older sister, she was always sick. Always at the most inconvenient times, poor thing. It was a terrible burden on us all, especially Mother. I offered no comment on this particular recollection, merely nodding, my expression neutral. The irony was a cold, satisfying weight in my chest. I proposed a cutting-edge, albeit lengthy, treatment protocol, one requiring multiple ongoing sessions. It will give us the best chance for a full recovery, I explained, but it demands commitment. Perfect, I thought, for sustained psychological warfare, a steady drip of my presence into her carefully constructed world. With each subsequent appointment, as I administered treatments and monitored her slow progress, she spoke more freely, unwittingly painting a detailed picture of their lives, their finances, their anxieties, all while remaining utterly oblivious to the identity of the calm, skilled surgeon treating her. It was during a review of Carmen's extensive patient intake forms, a necessity for the experimental treatment, that the first true crack in their financial facade appeared. Under family medical history, her mother had, with surprising carelessness, listed the cause of her first daughter's death as natural causes, unforeseen complications. A small, almost insignificant detail, yet it snagged my attention. My first life had ended due to a treatable heart condition, exacerbated by medical neglect directly tied to their refusal to fund necessary surgeries. Natural causes was a lie. A few discreet inquiries, leveraging the access my new identity afforded me, unearthed the truth. Isabella Martinez had not only lied on the death certificate, but she had also collected a substantial life insurance payout, $500,000. Money that was ostensibly for my future medical care, had I lived. Money that had instead, I pieced together, become the seed capital for Martinez Music Academy, the prestigious institution my mother had built from the ground up. Every scholarship they boasted, every gleaming instrument, every ambitious young student paying exorbitant fees, all of it was built upon the stolen value of my forsaken life. The Academy's financial records, which I managed to obtain through a carefully cultivated contact sympathetic to medical ethics, were pristine. Too pristine, in fact, for a woman who had famously struggled with basic arithmetic throughout her own education. The tendrils of their deceit extended further. My father, Ricardo Martinez, whose construction company had inexplicably flourished in the years following my death, had long preached the virtues of hard work and fiscal prudence. The truth, as I began to unravel it, was far more cynical. His company, Martinez Construction, had landed its most lucrative contracts, particularly for public school renovations, through an old connection. Marcus Thorne, my former best friend. Marcus, now a rising star in the city planning department, had once tearfully promised my younger self he'd help find a way to pay for my surgery, then vanished when the financial burden became too real. Now, it seemed, his guilt had found a new, more profitable outlet, steering lucrative municipal projects directly into Ricardo's hands. A poetic, if sickening, form of guilt investment, fueled indirectly by the very funds that should have saved me. Old loyalty, or perhaps complicity, bought and paid for with my blood money. The universe, it seemed, had a grim sense of timing. Marcus Thorne himself appeared at Mount Sinai not long after these revelations, seeking a cardiac screening. His medical file, which landed on my desk for review due to his city official status and my specialization, indicated stress-induced hypertension. The irony was not lost on me. The pressure of maintaining a lie, of covering up years of subtle corruption, was literally straining his heart. During his examination, he had the audacity to affect a somber tone. "You know, doctor," he said, shaking his head, "this city contract business is stressful, but it reminds me of a poor girl I knew growing up. Elena Martinez, tragic case, wonderful girl, so smart. Died because her family just couldn't afford the treatment she needed. I tried to help, of course, find funding, but she was already too far gone." He sighed, the picture of sorrowful remembrance. I maintained my professional composure, completing the echocardiogram. As I prepared to administer a mild sedative for a follow-up stress test, I leaned in close, my voice a soft murmur. "It's a terrible thing, Mr. Thorne, when people are abandoned. But sometimes dead girls don't stay dead. Sometimes they come back." He laughed, a short, nervous bark, his eyes darting to mine. "That's a morbid thought, doctor." The past continued to resurface uninvited. Dr. Richard Chen, my former cardiology professor at university and a man whose mentorship had nearly cost me my dignity, requested a meeting. Years ago, he had been a gatekeeper to my medical future. He'd dangled the prospect of waiving the prohibitive costs of my initial, life-saving heart surgery, the one my parents had ultimately refused to fund comprehensively. His price? Special favors, he'd called them, his lecherous gaze undressing me in his book-lined office. When I had recoiled, horrified and indignant, he had systematically, subtly blocked my applications to premier medical schools, nearly derailing my ambitions before they could even take flight. Now a renowned figure in his own right, he sought collaboration. He'd heard of my success with the Brazilian president and wanted to discuss potential joint research on cardiovascular care for high-profile political figures. I agreed to a meeting suggesting a location steeped in significance. Lecture Hall 3B, the very room where he had once tried to coerce me. This time, however, Dr. Elena Vasquez would be in control. This time, I would be recording everything. He arrived punctually, exuding an air of collegial bonhomie, oblivious to the storm gathering behind my polite smile. We spoke of medical advancements, of challenging cases, his words smooth and self-important. Then, as he paused for breath, I reached into my briefcase and retrieved a small digital recorder. "Before we discuss future collaborations, Dr. Chen," I said, my voice even, "I thought perhaps we could revisit a past one." I pressed play. His own voice, tinny and distorted by the age of the recording, but undeniably his, filled the lecture hall. The oily propositions, the veiled threats, my younger self's hesitant then firm refusals. His face, moments before wreathed in confident smiles, turned ashen. His eyes, wide with disbelief and dawning horror, darted from the recorder to my face. That's impossible," he stammered, his voice a hoarse whisper. "That recording, Elena Martinez died. She died years ago." I leaned forward, my gaze unwavering. Did she? The silence in my office following Dr. Chen's stammered disbelief was thick enough to dissect. "Did she?" I repeated, my voice a soft, silken threat. His pallor was satisfying. The fear in his eyes, the dawning comprehension of who I truly was a balm to a wound decades old. He left my office a broken man, the recording a ticking bomb in his compromised career. For Carmen, the path I laid out was medical, precise, and deliberately incapacitating. "The experimental nanobot therapy for your tendinitis shows immense promise, Carmen," I explained during her next appointment, Isabella Martinez hovering anxiously nearby. "But it requires an aggressive initial phase. Complete, absolute rest for both hands. 6 months minimum. No practice, no performing. Any strain could cause irreversible damage." Carmen's face crumpled. 6 months? But my European tour, my recording contract. It's all scheduled to start in 2. Isabella wrung her hands. "Doctor, isn't there anything else? This would be financial ruin. Her momentum." "Momentum," I echoed internally, the word a bitter pill. I remembered my own momentum, the fragile hope for a normal life, shattered by their choices, by their prioritization of her recitals over my failing heartbeat. "This is the best course of action for long-term recovery," I stated firmly. Then, with carefully calibrated generosity, I added, "The treatment is admittedly expensive, but given the circumstances, and as a fellow admirer of the arts, I'm prepared to see if the hospital foundation can cover a significant portion of the costs." Relief warred with despair on their faces. They accepted, of course, profusely grateful. They had no idea they were agreeing to spend the very insurance money Isabella had fraudulently claimed upon my supposed death, now laundered through my legitimate success and philanthropic endeavors. Carmen wept later, not in my presence but reported to me by a concerned nurse, about her ruined year, her stolen opportunities. I listened, unmoved. I remembered crying about a ruined childhood, a stolen chance at life. The medical board's investigation into Dr. Richard Chen proceeded, fueled by anonymous tips, my tips, and now the undeniable evidence of his past conduct. I was formally requested to provide an expert review of his research publications and patient outcomes over the past 15 years. It was a task I undertook with surgical precision. His data, when scrutinized with a discerning eye, revealed a disturbing pattern. Patient outcomes, particularly for young women presenting with complex but treatable conditions, showed a statistically significant decline under his direct care, often after they had declined his mentorship or specialized assistance. I compiled my findings into a comprehensive report, annexing anonymized but verifiable case studies. And, of course, the damning audio recordings from our long-ago encounter in Lecture Hall 3B. My testimony before the board was delivered with the same steady hands that performed open-heart surgery. Professional, dispassionate, and utterly devastating, his attempts at bluster and denial crumbled under the weight of meticulously presented facts. Marcus Thorne's cardiac health, meanwhile, remained a point of professional interest. I scheduled his follow-up stress test, citing concerning arrhythmias from his initial screening. The timing was, shall we say, strategic. On the very morning he was due on my treadmill, The city papers were already hinting at an impending FBI raid on the city planning department, focused on irregularities in public works contracts. As predicted during the pre-test interview, when I gently inquired about his stress levels given the unsettling news about his department, his blood pressure spiked alarmingly. The EKG, even before the treadmill began, showed dangerous irregularities. "Mr. Thorne, I'm afraid we can't proceed with the stress test," I announced, my voice laced with appropriate urgency. "These readings are critical. I need to admit you immediately for observation and likely an emergency angiogram." He protested weakly, muttering about important meetings, about needing to be at his office. I was firm. "Your health is paramount. Whatever it is, it can wait. A heart attack cannot." As he was rushed to the cardiac catheterization lab, effectively sequestered under my medical authority, federal agents were indeed swarming his office, seizing computers and files. The scheduled shredding of incriminating documents, I later learned, never happened. The paper trail linking kickbacks to my father's construction company survived intact. Marcus Thorne's political career flatlined as definitively as a dangerous arrhythmia brought under control. His personal health, ironically, would improve under my care. The fallout from Marcus's arrest and the subsequent investigation was immediate. Martinez Construction, with its primary benefactor now under federal indictment, failed the rigorous presidential security background check. The lucrative White House renovation contract, a $50 million jewel that Ricardo had boasted would secure their retirement, vanished overnight. I heard through the ever-efficient hospital gossip mill that Isabella had been admitted to our ER for a panic attack, screaming about being ruined, about losing their entire future. From a discreet, untraceable account, I made another substantial anonymous donation towards Carmen's ongoing medical expenses, ensuring their continued, unwitting dependence on my generosity, even as their empire crumbled around them. The local news channels feasted on the unfolding scandal. Dad's grim mugshot was plastered across television screens, often juxtaposed with file footage of Carmen's canceled concert announcements. The Martinez Music Academy, once a beacon of their social climbing, found itself mired in controversy as whispers of blood money and financial impropriety began to circulate. Former students, emboldened by the family's sudden vulnerability, started demanding tuition refunds, citing the tarnished reputation of the institution. Isabella, they said, aged 5 years and as many days. From the serene quiet of my penthouse apartment, overlooking Central Park, I watched the news reports, sipping a glass of vintage Bordeaux that cost more than their dwindling monthly income. The taste was exquisite. One evening, as a news anchor detailed the widening scope of the fraud investigation into city contracts and the subsequent ruin of Martinez Construction, she added a new, startling detail. Investigators are also reportedly looking into older financial irregularities tied to the Martinez family, she intoned gravely, including insurance claims filed decades ago connected to the medical bills of their deceased elder daughter, Elena Martinez. The wine glass, cool and smooth in my hand just moments before, slipped. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden silence of my apartment, red wine spreading like a pool of blood. For the first time in years, my carefully constructed composure fractured. They were getting closer to the original sin. The news report about the insurance investigation was a jolt, an unforeseen acceleration of my carefully paced retribution. They were digging into the circumstances of Elena Martinez's death, the very foundation of my stolen second chance. It was time to control the narrative to ensure the truth emerged on my terms. I compiled a meticulously documented file. My original birth certificate, the falsified death certificate, medical records from my childhood detailing the denied treatments, subsequent records under my new identity confirming my survival and ongoing management of the congenital heart defect, and finally, my current medical license and credentials as Dr. Elena Vasquez. This dossier, delivered anonymously but verifiably to the lead federal investigator, was a bombshell. It didn't just hint at fraud, it proved I was alive, transforming a cold case of potential insurance misrepresentation into a massive, active fraud case with a living victim. Isabella Martinez, my mother, was no longer just facing questions about shady academy finances. She was staring down the barrel of up to 20 years in federal prison for felony insurance fraud, identity theft, and a host of related charges. Carmen's remaining tour money, the funds she desperately hoped would salvage her career once her hands healed, was swiftly frozen as potential proceeds of crime. Their first panicked move was to hire the city's most notoriously expensive defense attorneys, using, I noted with a deeply satisfying irony, the last dregs of the money that legally, morally, and now demonstrably belonged to me. The taste of that particular irony was indeed as delicious as aged wine. The financial dominoes began to fall with devastating speed. Without access to Carmen's frozen assets and with Ricardo's construction income now non-existent, the Martinez Music Academy could no longer meet its lease obligations for its prime Lincoln Center adjacent premises. The eviction notices were swift. Through a series of discreetly layered shell corporations, a tactic I'd learned from observing the underhanded dealings of some of the world's wealthiest and most corrupt individuals, many of whom had ironically been my patients, I purchased the building. The day the eviction was finalized, I walked through the empty studios, the silence echoing with the ghosts of 1,000 scales and arpeggios. Carmen's childhood studio, the one where she'd practiced relentlessly while I'd gasped for breath in the next room, was slated to become the new pediatric wing of a charitable clinic I funded, specializing in cardiac care for underprivileged children. Her prized baby grand piano, a symbol of her ascendance and my neglect, was carefully moved and donated to the children's ward at Mount Sinai, where I volunteered on weekends. Let it bring comfort to children who truly needed it. The inevitable confrontation arrived cloaked in desperation. Carmen requested a meeting, not at the hospital where I was a figure of authority, but at my private surgical practice office, a neutral ground she perhaps hoped would disarm me. She arrived looking wan and diminished, the vibrant confidence I'd seen on stage replaced by a raw, pleading vulnerability. The pretense was gone. "Elena," she began, her voice barely a whisper, the name a strange melody on her lips after so many years. "It is you. Dr. Vasquez, all this time." She gestured vaguely at the opulent surroundings, the awards for saving presidents and prime ministers glinting on the mahogany credenza. "Please," she begged, tears welling in her eyes. "You have to make them stop. The investigators, the charges. Mother is falling apart. We'll give you whatever is left. We can split our remaining assets. Just make this go away." I leaned back in my custom leather chair, the one that offered a commanding view of Central Park, a world away from the cramped, stifling apartment of my first life. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet, devoid of the fury that had once consumed me, replaced by a chilling calm. "You had your chance to save me once, Carmen," I said, my gaze steady on hers. "A chance to speak up, to insist, to value my life as much as your music. You chose Chopin instead. The story, now a matter of public record due to the federal investigation, became a media sensation. Miracle surgeon's secret past, abandoned daughter returns to dismantle family empire." Headlines blared. I agreed to a single, carefully controlled television interview. The reporter, a seasoned journalist known for her incisive questions, asked the inevitable. "Dr. Vasquez, after such profound betrayal and neglect, how did you find the strength to not only survive, but to achieve such extraordinary success?" I gestured around my office, not just to the awards and diplomas, but to the view, the tangible evidence of a life rebuilt not on revenge, but on relentless excellence. "Every life I save," I stated, my voice clear and unwavering. "Every surgery I perform is a testament to the fact that I deserved to live. My work is my answer." Within hours of the broadcast, Julian Thorne, Carmen's beleaguered agent, was on the phone, his voice strained, begging me to retract my statement, to show some familial compassion for the devastated Martinez family. I declined, politely but firmly. The truth, however uncomfortable for them, was now out. The final pathetic act of their unraveling played out not in a courtroom, but on the polished marble floors of Mount Sinai. Isabella Martinez, my mother, appeared unannounced in the cardiac wing, her hair disheveled, her eyes wild. She began to scream, a torrent of accusations and self-pity, railing against ungrateful daughters, the injustice of it all, the sanctity of family loyalty. It was a grotesque performance. Hospital security, alerted by concerned nurses, swiftly and professionally removed her. I continued my rounds, checking on a recovering pediatric patient, the sounds of her tirade fading down the corridor. That evening, she was arrested for trespassing and disturbing the peace. Local news crews, ever present, captured the ignominious footage of Isabella Martinez, founder of the once-esteemed Martinez Music Academy, being led away in handcuffs. Carmen, I learned later, posted her bail, depleting the very last of her accessible savings. The empire was well and truly bankrupt, morally and financially. Later that night, as I reviewed patient charts in the quiet of my home study, a text message illuminated my phone screen. An unknown number, just 7 words. Your real parents want to meet you. My breath caught. The medical files, the official documents, they had always listed Ricardo and Isabella Martinez as my parents. But the phrasing, real parents, sent a tremor through me, a sensation far more profound than any satisfaction derived from the Martinez family's downfall. My hands, usually so steady, so precise, trembled as I stared at the message, the implication vast and terrifyingly hopeful. The Martinez family might not be my biological family at all. The cryptic text message became an obsession. My meticulously ordered world, recently realigned by the methodical dismantling of the Martinez dynasty, tilted on an entirely new axis. I engaged a private investigator, a discreet professional with an impeccable track record, tasking him with one singular objective: uncover the truth of my parentage. The results arrived with astonishing speed, delivered in a sealed, unassuming manila envelope that pulsed with the weight of revelation. I was adopted. The Martinez family, the architects of my childhood suffering and near demise, were not my biological kin. My birth parents, the report detailed with irrefutable documentation, DNA markers, sealed adoption records illegally procured, witness testimonies from decades past, were Dr. Isabella Restrepo and Ambassador Carlos Vasquez. The names resonated with a power that eclipsed even the shock of the initial discovery. Dr. Restrepo was a titan in the world of medical research, the founder and driving force behind the largest philanthropic medical research foundation in South America, a name synonymous with groundbreaking advancements in pediatric care. Ambassador Vasquez, her husband, was the Colombian ambassador to the United Nations, a respected diplomat whose influence spanned continents. They had, the investigators' report painfully chronicled, searched for me for 30 years. I was their stolen child, lost to a corrupt international adoption agency that had preyed on vulnerable birth mothers and wealthy, unsuspecting adoptive families, selling infants like commodities. The Martinez family had been one such client. And then the most staggering revelation, the piece that recontextualized my entire second life. My biological parents had never truly lost me. They had discovered the illegal adoption years ago, but had been unable to legally reclaim me without causing immense scandal and potentially endangering my well-being within the Martinez household, given their lack of concrete proof of neglect at the time. Instead, they had watched from afar, anonymous benefactors pulling strings I never knew existed. The state-of-the-art pediatric heart surgery I received as an infant, the one that had given me a fighting chance before the Martinez's subsequent neglect took its toll. They had funded it through untraceable charitable donations specifically earmarked for my case. My scholarships to the best medical schools, the coveted residency at Mount Sinai, even the subtle nudges that led to high-profile surgical opportunities like the Brazilian president. It had all been their silent, guiding hand, ensuring their lost daughter received every advantage, every opportunity to fulfill a potential they had always believed in. I was not just a survivor. I was, in a sense, medical royalty, unknowingly groomed and protected by a lineage of profound influence and dedication to healing. The Martinez family hadn't just neglected a sick child. They had effectively kidnapped, defrauded, and nearly killed the daughter of a powerful diplomat and a pioneering medical scientist. The public revelation of the adoption fraud, initiated by Ambassador Vasquez and Dr. Restrepo, armed with the investigators' now irrefutable evidence, exploded into an international incident. Diplomatic immunity shielded my biological parents as they pursued sweeping criminal and civil charges against everyone involved in the decades-old deception. The corrupt adoption agency, long defunct but with former employees now facing extradition, became the subject of intense global scrutiny. The Martinez family, already crumbling, found themselves at the epicenter of a far larger, more devastating scandal. Dr. Chen, whose past predatory behavior was now linked to a pattern of exploiting vulnerable individuals, also faced renewed federal prosecution, his professional ruin complete. Carmen's recently rescheduled comeback concerts across Europe were canceled en masse. No venue, no promoter, wanted to be associated with a family now infamous for kidnapping and child endangerment on an international scale. The power shift was absolute. I was no longer just Dr. Elena Vasquez, the brilliant surgeon. I was formally introduced to the world as Elena Vasquez Restrepo, the long-lost daughter of Ambassador Carlos Vasquez and Dr. Isabella Restrepo. My surgical skills, already formidable, were now augmented by an almost untouchable status conferred by my family's diplomatic standing and vast resources. The same echelons of society, the political figures and financial titans who had once, perhaps peripherally known of the struggling Martinez family and their sickly elder daughter, now clamored for my attention, my medical expertise. Heads of state who had previously been inaccessible now sought my consultation, not just for my skills, but for the connection to my influential parents. I operated on their hearts, literally holding their lives in my hands, while they offered hushed apologies for a past they hadn't directly caused, but now felt compelled to acknowledge. The irony was a constant, almost surreal companion. In the midst of this whirlwind, Carmen reached her breaking point. The news of the adoption, the final crushing blow of realizing her entire life with her sister had been predicated on a monumental lie and crime, proved too much. During what was meant to be a small, privately arranged recital, a desperate attempt to reclaim some semblance of her former life, she collapsed. A drug overdose. The emergency call came to Mount Sinai, and I, Dr. Elena Vasquez Restrepo, was the lead cardiac surgeon on call. I saved her life. The full, bitter circularity of it all was not lost on me as I worked to stabilize her, restarting the heart that her family, our shared family for so long, had once so callously disregarded in my own chest. As she recovered in a private room, the media frenzy carefully kept at bay by hospital security and diplomatic intervention, I sat by her bedside. She was pale, fragile, the fight gone from her. "Why?" she whispered, her voice hoarse, tears tracking through the remnants of stage makeup. "After everything, why save me?" "Because I wished someone had been there to save me, Carmen," I said quietly. "Because I know what it feels like to be at the bottom, to feel like there's no way out." I paused, then met her gaze directly. "I can forgive your pain, your desperation. I understand it more than you know, but I don't forgive your choices, not then, not now. You always had options, I never did. You repeatedly chose ambition and applause over basic human compassion." A flicker of something unreadable crossed her face. Days later, as she was being prepared for discharge to a private care facility, she looked at me, a strange lucidity in her eyes. "I remember now," she whispered, so faintly I almost didn't hear it. "Back then, before everything got so loud, before the music took over, you were always the brilliant one, the one who understood things. We, mother, father, we were so jealous of that, of you." A confession after all these years, but was it redemption or just another note in a long, sorrowful song? And was it, I wondered, far too late for either of us? The request for a meeting arrived via a phalanx of expensive lawyers, the very ones the Martinez family could no longer truly afford. They wished to discuss matters of mutual interest and potential reconciliation at the hospital, a neutral territory now heavily slanted in my favor. It was a transparent plea, a final, desperate gambit before the full weight of the federal charges and international condemnation crushed them completely. I agreed, stipulating the hospital's largest conference room, a sterile, imposing space often used for board meetings and high stakes negotiations. They arrived as a diminished delegation: Isabella, Ricardo, their legal team, a nervous looking local priest clearly out of his depth, and Carmen. Carmen, looking healthier than she had in weeks, but still bearing the fragile air of someone recently pulled back from the abyss, carried her violin case. As the Martinez contingent and their entourage assembled in the polished mahogany grandeur of the conference room, the faint, melancholic strains of Bach's Chaconne drifted up from the hospital lobby. Carmen was playing, her music a desperate, mournful offering, an attempt perhaps to weave a spell of nostalgia and shared history, hoping the notes would soften a heart she had so thoroughly helped to break. I listened from the surgical floor observation deck, overlooking the cavernous lobby. That same melody, I recalled with a pang that was more memory than pain, had once been a source of strange comfort to me during long, painful nights struggling for breath. A beauty that existed just beyond my suffering. A suffering her family, our family, had refused to adequately fund or alleviate. The reunion, as their lawyers euphemistically termed it, began with Isabella. Her performance was worthy of a tragic opera. She wept, she confessed. She spoke of overwhelming maternal instincts warped by crushing financial pressure and the blinding ambition she had harbored for Carmen. She claimed she genuinely believed I was going to die anyway, that my prognosis was hopeless, a blatant lie contradicted by all my early medical records. And so, investing in Carmen's seemingly limitless future had appeared the only logical path. Her lawyers interjected frequently, reframing blatant neglect and fraud as tragic miscommunications, errors in judgment under duress, and a mother's understandable if misguided devotion. I sat in silence at the head of the enormous table, flanked by my own legal counsel and a discreet diplomatic attaché who was meticulously recording everything for the official record, his presence a silent reminder of the international implications of their actions. My biological mother, Dr. Restrepo, had insisted on the attaché's presence. I let Isabella exhaust herself, her voice growing hoarse, her elaborate justifications hanging heavy in the air. Next came Ricardo. His confession was less theatrical, more imbued with a weary, self-pitying guilt. He admitted to knowing about the insurance fraud, the falsified documents, the diversion of funds. He hadn't orchestrated it, he claimed, but he had enabled it all to protect Carmen's innocence, to shield her from the harsh realities of their financial struggles and the burden of my illness. He offered to serve my prison sentence, an empty, legally impossible gesture. He offered me his now defunct construction company, its assets seized or worthless. He even, in a moment of pathetic desperation, offered to work as my janitor, to scrub floors, anything, if it would earn my forgiveness. His tears, genuine or crocodile, fell onto the gleaming surface of the conference table, a table that likely cost more than their foreclosed home. I watched him, my expression carefully neutral. My surgical training a perfect armor for emotional control. Years of steadying my hands over open hearts had taught me to compartmentalize, to observe without absorbing. Then, it was Carmen's turn. She didn't speak, not at first. Instead, she raised her violin. The piece she chose was Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor, the Funeral March. The irony was so thick, so grotesquely poignant, it was almost suffocating. The same piece she had played with such focused brilliance the night I had nearly died, the night her recital had taken precedence over my emergency surgery. The strains filled the room, beautiful, heartbreaking, and utterly manipulative. Halfway through, her composure shattered. The bow skittered across the strings, producing a discordant shriek. She broke down sobbing, the violin slipping from her grasp. "I knew," she choked out, the words torn from her. "I knew you were dying. I knew you needed that surgery, but my debut, Lincoln Center, I couldn't bear to cancel." She looked at me then, her eyes pleading, awash with tears. "Don't you remember, Elena, our childhood? Before the music, before it consumed everything. We were sisters. I remembered her practicing for hours while I lay in bed, the sound of her scales a counterpoint to the wheezing of my lungs. I remembered her irritation when my coughing fits interrupted her concentration. I remembered the silence from my parents when I begged for help, their attention always, always on her. When the last tear had fallen, when the last desperate excuse had been uttered, when the silence stretched, taut, and expectant, I finally stood. My movements were calm, deliberate. My voice, when I spoke, was as steady and precise as a surgeon's incision. "I forgive you," I said, my gaze sweeping over their ravaged faces. "I forgive you for being human, for being weak, for making selfish choices under pressure. We all do, at times." A flicker of hope ignited in Isabella's eyes, in Ricardo's slumped shoulders. "But," I continued, my voice hardening almost imperceptibly, "I do not forgive you for being cruel. I do not forgive the years of calculated neglect, the deliberate prioritization of ambition over a child's life. I survived your abandonment once. I will not enable it or you ever again." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. "The answer," I stated, clearly and unequivocally, is no. No to dropping charges, no to intervention, no to any further association. You will face the consequences of your actions." I turned and walked towards the door, the sound of my heels clicking on the marble floor, the only sound in the room. Behind me, I heard a strangled sob, then another, as they collapsed into a tableau of desperate, inconsolable grief, their last fragile hope disappearing like my childhood heartbeat had once threatened to do. As my hand reached the polished brass handle of the conference room door, Carmen's voice, raw and desperate, cut through the air. "Wait, Elena, wait! What if I can prove you were never really our daughter anyway?" I paused, my hand trembling, just for a moment, on the handle. The adoption was public record now, but her words, laced with a strange, wild desperation, hinted at something more, something unknown. The echo of Carmen's desperate last-ditch question faded as I stepped out of the conference room, leaving the Martinez family to the stark reality of their choices. Her words, though born of panic, held no power over me then. The truth of my parentage was already a settled healing balm. 5 years later, the Miami sun warmed my face as I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, the turquoise expanse of the Atlantic stretching before me, painted gold by the sunrise. The Vasquez Restrepo Medical Foundation, the institution my biological mother had founded and which I now helped lead, had become a global force in pediatric cardiac care. We had funded thousands of life-saving surgeries for children like the little girl I once was, children whose families faced insurmountable financial barriers to essential treatment. Carmen, as part of her significantly reduced sentence, due to her cooperation, and my own quiet, non-committal testimony regarding her fragile mental state, served her community service hours teaching music therapy at our foundation's flagship pediatric cardiac unit. She'd found a different kind of applause there, a quieter, more profound resonance in the smiles of recovering children. She was learning, slowly, painstakingly, that music healed best when it served something larger than ego. A crisp, official-looking envelope arrived with the morning courier. It was a letter from the president of Brazil, the man whose life I had saved that fateful night 5 years prior, the night Carmen had played Chopin at Lincoln Center. His daughter, he wrote, inspired by my story, which had, of course, become international news, had just graduated from medical school and was pursuing cardiology. In recognition of my service to his country and my ongoing philanthropic work, he was naming a new state-of-the-art children's hospital in Sao Paulo after me, the Dr. Elena Vasquez Restrepo Pediatric Heart Center. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile, and later framed the letter. It hung on my office wall beside my array of surgical licenses, international medical awards, and a cherished photograph of my biological parents, Ambassador Vasquez and Dr. Restrepo, beaming with pride at my official and somewhat belated medical school graduation ceremony, the family that had chosen to find and save me, rather than abandon and forget. Marcus Thorne, my former best friend, had found a different path to redemption. His political career was long over, but he'd channeled his energy and skills into becoming a construction foreman, specializing in building affordable, high-quality housing in underserved communities. He still sent me occasional progress photos of each completed project: a new community center, a block of safe apartments for low-income families, always accompanied by short handwritten notes expressing remorse and a quiet dedication to making amends in the only way he knew how. I never responded directly, but the Vasquez Restrepo Foundation anonymously became a significant investor in several of his largest developments. His forgiveness, I had learned, didn't always require reconciliation or renewed friendship, but it did allow for a certain kind of peace, for him and, surprisingly, for me. His medical records, which I still reviewed as a courtesy at his new doctor's request, showed his blood pressure had normalized. He was no longer living a life built on lies, and his heart reflected it. The academic world, too, had embraced my story and my work. Harvard Medical School, my alma mater, invited me to establish and endow the Elena Vasquez Restrepo Chair in Global Pediatric Cardiology. The endowment was structured to ensure that, in perpetuity, no child accepted into their care for a treatable heart condition would be denied surgery or treatment due to financial barriers. It was a legacy I was immensely proud of. In a turn of events that spoke volumes about the capacity for change, or perhaps the desperation for employment, Dr. Richard Chen, his medical license suspended for several years and now only partially reinstated for supervised clinical work, applied for a nursing position at one of the rural clinics funded by our foundation. After careful consideration and a lengthy, humbling interview conducted by the clinic director, I approved his application. Everyone, I believed, deserved a chance to heal the wounds they had inflicted, to contribute positively, however small the scale. My biological parents were a constant grounding presence in my life. They visited for Christmas that year, filling my Miami home with laughter, intellectual debate, and the easy warmth of unconditional love. We'd pore over medical journals late into the night, Dr. Restrepo and I co-authoring research papers that advanced the frontiers of pediatric cardiac surgery. Ambassador Vasquez, between patient rounds when he accompanied me to the hospital, taught me the finer points of chess. His strategic mind, a fascinating counterpoint to my mother's scientific brilliance. This, I often thought, was what family truly felt like: a shared passion, mutual respect, an unwavering choice to love and support, not to perform and abandon. Carmen, too, found a new voice. She released an independent album, a collection of hauntingly beautiful instrumental pieces dedicated to medical workers and first responders. All proceeds were directed to a scholarship fund for aspiring cardiac surgeons from disadvantaged backgrounds. The title track, an intricate and moving piece for solo violin and cello, was called Elena's Heartbeat. It was a stunning musical interpretation of an EKG rhythm, moving from erratic and failing patterns to a strong, steady, life-affirming pulse. She performed it at our foundation's annual gala, tears streaming down her face as she played, her technique flawless, her emotion raw and undeniably genuine. The audience, largely unaware of the intricate, painful history between us, felt only the profound love, loss, and ultimately, the hope woven through every note. As the years passed, the sharp edges of the past softened. I often walked the beach behind my penthouse in the evenings, the surgical scrubs of the day replaced by flowing white linen. The salt breeze carried the distant, joyful sounds of children playing at the surf. Children whose hearts beat strong and true because of surgeries my foundation had funded. Surgeries performed by doctors we had trained. One such evening, as the first stars pricked the darkening sky, my phone chimed with a secure text message. It was from the Colombian president's chief of staff, a man whose child I had operated on years before. Dr. Vasquez Restrepo, emergency consult needed, pediatric cardiac anomaly, complex case. Can you fly out tomorrow? Can you save another life? I smiled, the familiar thrum of purpose, of duty, quickening my pulse. I typed back a simple, immediate reply. Always. 20 years had passed since my first premature death. I was more alive, more vibrantly engaged with the world than I could ever have imagined. The girl who had nearly died from a broken heart, both literally and figuratively, had become the woman who mended them for a living. I had operated on 7 presidents, 32 prime ministers or their direct family members, and over 3,000 children who, like me, deserved the chance I had almost been denied. The Martinez family had chosen the fleeting, hollow sound of temporary applause over the enduring strength of permanent love. I, in turn, had chosen the quiet, profound satisfaction of permanent healing over the bitter, corrosive taste of temporary revenge. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the Atlantic horizon, I unconsciously touched the small, faded scar above my heart, the only visible remaining mark from my childhood surgeries. It no longer ached with the ghost of abandonment, but pulsed with a quiet, steady purpose. Tomorrow, I would save another life, perhaps funding the procedure with the very interest accrued from the money they had once denied me for my own. The cycle felt complete, not in a vengeful way, but in a way that spoke of transformation. From dying daughter to healing surgeon, from a heart broken by neglect to a legacy built on mending others. The ocean whispered its ancient, rhythmic approval as the waves gently erased my footprints in the sand, carrying away the last lingering traces of old pain, leaving only the steady, resilient rhythm of a heart that had chosen, against all odds, to keep beating, to keep loving, to keep healing, despite everything they had done to stop it. I am Dr. Elena Vasquez Restrepo, cardiac surgeon to world leaders, daughter of diplomats, survivor of profound abandonment, and unwavering guardian of beating hearts. They chose her recital over my heart surgery again, all those years ago, but this time and every time since, I chose to live anyway.